Michael Kelly, what was your favorite thing about House of Cards season 4?
I think probably all the great actors that were brought on this year. I mean, Ellen Burstyn's someone I've admired for forever. You know, I actually had met her prior at Actor Studio, where I sort of came up when I got to New York City, the Real House, Actor Studio House. And she was a moderator of a lot of the sessions that I went to as an observer before I became a member. So she's someone I've admired and loved, and obviously just adored her work through the years. See someone like her and Cicely Tyson and Neve Campbell. I mean, it's incredible what they were able to, how many people they were able to bring on this year that were just incredible. Joel Kinnaman, I mean, it's incredible.
Do you feel like it's become easier as the show's gone on? Like you've now earned this sort of respect where you've got these like actors lining up to want to be a part of the show?
I mean, you know, probably. I don't know if there was. I don't know how that casting process went. I mean, Lorraine Mayfield and Julie Schubert are so good at what they do. But I would imagine, you know, I know that all of my friends who are actors want to be on the show, so I would imagine that it spreads through, you know.
And what do you think the biggest moment for Doug was this season on the show?
I mean, it's funny because, I mean, obviously season 3 had a couple of really splashy moments, but I always see Doug as sort of like the overall picture, right? I mean, it's not a, there's not like a ton of moments that just stand out. It's just sort of that he's just always up to something, and that's what's so interesting about him, and the thing that I find fascinating about playing the character. But I guess like if you had to pinpoint one specific moment, that I love that scene that well, the introductory scene with Neve Campbell's character, who I've dubbed Lady Stamper, and hopefully we're going to get to see more of her doing some of those things next year. And the two of us going head to head, but that moment with Derek Cecil, Seth Grayson with the cup over his mouth, it was that scene was probably one of the more difficult scenes that we did all year, because the two of us as actors didn't see eye to eye on that scene prior to going in and filming it. So leading up to it was just as difficult as the actual filming of that scene. Just talking about it until we did see eye to eye, and then we would go over it at my apartment there in Baltimore, or his apartment. We would get together some nights and just work on it until we were both comfortable enough to go in there and put it on its feet. And that moment of going from 0 to 60 in that scene, I think was probably one of the more challenging things, because it really is a 0 to 60 moment. But that's what's cool about our show, is the collaboration, the willingness to work off set, the willingness to put in all your homework so that when you get there on set, you really can truly play around and be in the moment.
And what's that like when you're like with another actor and you don't see eye to eye on how to play the scene? Like what do you have to do to sort of get on the same page?
I think, you know, at least what, you know, I can't speak for other people, but works for me, works for Derek and myself in that specific situation, was just a lot of talking about it before we ever even spoke the words. It was just, you know, in the beginning, Derek was sort of like, well, I don't even physically see how it's possible. I'm a bigger guy than you. How would I even, how would I even let this happen? And I said, because I'm fucking Stamper. That's why. Oh, sorry, my mouth. And we had a good laugh about it. But I was like, no, I think, you know, it's really that element of catching someone completely by surprise. I mean, he was in a very vulnerable state, in that, you know, he knew he had messed up. He knew I knew that he messed up, and he knew that he was in trouble. And then I said, all right, you know what? You're fine. Everything's okay. And so for that's what we have finally agreed on how it would happen, was that moment of, okay, I'm not in trouble, and you really let your guard down for a second. And then that element of catching someone by surprise. So yeah, talking, I think, was what worked that.
And I think like the interesting thing about that scene for Doug was it was sort of a big scene of sort of violence we hadn't seen a whole bunch of from him before. Like he killed Rachel at the end of last season, but that was something he really tossed and turned over, and we didn't actually see the scene where he like killed her in a lot of ways too. So what was that like, going to explore that side of Doug Stamper? And do you think that was a new side of him that we saw?
I think that anything that he ever does, and this is just my personal take on him, anything that he ever does, that's inside of him. He's capable of, I do believe that Doug Stamper is probably capable of doing anything. But I don't think that we're going to see, violent Doug Stamper moving forward. I think that that's something that just, he tried other ways of dealing with Seth Grayson that weren't working. And he said, okay, well, this is obviously how he has to be handled. And it proved effective. he's a pretty smart dude. And that really goes back to the writing. When Beau Willimon first approached us about that scene, Derek and I were having lunch, and Beau walked in and he sat down and he's like, "You guys read the notes?" So we're like, "Yeah." And we had just been talking about it, and Beau was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "I think you're sick, dude. I think you're sick, but I love it." And Derek was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know." And Beau's like, "Come on, you guys. We've never seen this. You've never seen it in film. You've never seen it in television. Like, it's really cool. That scene's never been done, and many things have been done, but you've never seen someone choked out with a glass and a pinching of the nostrils before."
Were there any issues with the glass? Like, did you break any glasses practicing or anything?
No, I mean, I felt awful because Derek did get hurt. He had some bruising here because essentially to get that cup and to create the suction, this has got to be closed. And so, and basically the way we ended up in the master that we used of me coming on top of him, it was in a very compromising position on him that I sort of had my knees on the ground, but really more on his body and up here. So anytime we went to shoot any coverage of it, I actually had to hold that glass on him. And there was he had a breaking point. He was like, I'm done. That's it. I hope you got it because I can't take it anymore. And it did hurt him. And he had bruised his face, and I just felt awful. And there was nothing we could do to right it. But it wasn't glass. It was plastic.
Yeah. And the makeup department probably didn't love that either. They had to be like covering up bruises for the next week.
Couple days of touch ups on Derek. I felt awful, but in the end, I think we got a really cool scene, and like Beau said, something we haven't seen before. So that was great.
We had the big moment this season with Frank getting shot. And that created some big moments for Doug in the series too. Just how did you feel when you first read on that script, or you first told that Frank was getting shot this season and was sort of going to be out of commission for a couple of episodes?
I was like, oh man, how much am I going to be working? No, no, I thought, I thought what an interesting choice and direction to go with the show, to see what happens when this goes down. And then the rise of Claire during that was so great, and then being able to go toe to toe with Claire and play with Robin Wright on a level that we never got to explore before that was thrilling. She's just, she's an incredible actress, and I'm fortunate enough to work with all these great people. And Kevin Spacey, day in and day out, doing all these scenes together, and then to have all this stuff with Robin was great, because we don't typically interact, the two characters, a lot. So that was a lot of fun. She's a powerhouse, man, and to get to act opposite her is just a thrill. It's a thrill.
You obviously, that led to Doug having to do a bit of wheeling and dealing to offer his kidney and to get Frank the kidney, or the liver. I think it was the liver he needed.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes of the season is when you try to offer your own liver, and the doctor has to say, "Oh, I don't think your liver's that great." Anyway.
You're not the top candidate choice for a liver transplant, Doug.
Yeah. I think he's better with the shot one.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was, there was a couple different versions of that written before the one that we actually did. And I loved them all. I mean, it's all so interesting, right? But yeah, because I really wanted that Doug would do that Doug would risk himself. It's again that sort of at all costs thing that Doug operates on that I find so fascinating. That level of addiction that he has. Yes, of course, take my body parts, and the willingness to do what he did. I love that scene with the doctor, or I'm sorry, with the what is she, a general, the
Surgeon General or something like that.
Yeah. Where I go and I say, basically, I'm willing to kill another man for the president. And that was so interesting to play because on a very, obviously I understand Doug Stamper more than other people. I understand his actions more than other people do. But I understood that. Here was a person, and I'm not saying that I would do it, but I understood him saying, okay, here's a person who I don't know, who's not running the country. And yes, he has a family, and yes, this is terrible that this man's going to die, but I would much rather him die than the president of the United States and my boss and my future and all that stuff. For him, it was a simple choice. One that I think haunted him a bit later, obviously, and will probably continue to haunt him just like Rachel does. But I understood those actions, and that scene was as hard as it was, from a compassionate human to play that part, that role, or that scene. I understood it, So, and people are always like, oh, how do you do this? Or how do you do that as Doug? And it's because I can understand it on some, whatever level it is. I get his actions and I understand them.
We've seen Doug in that moment, like in those two sort of decisions. One where he's prepared to put his own life on the line for Frank, and the other one where he's prepared to put an innocent person who's completely disconnected from Frank's games and Frank's world and sacrifice his life for Frank. And we do see that real loyalty he has to Frank, maybe at its most extreme level through that arc. Why is he so loyal to Frank? Where does that come from? Because he's one of the few characters on the show that has truly aware of how dark Frank is and the big sort of sinister things Frank has done. Where do you think that loyalty to Frank comes from?
Well, I think that it's ultimately it's a combination of things, right? I mean, it's Frank and how long they've been together and the dedication he has for him. But I think it's also at its real, visceral core, so to speak. It's like that. It's addiction, right? It's everything for him is an addiction. Whether it was Rachel with the love for her, or whatever that was, or Frank, or the alcohol, or everything for him, his job included, is an addiction, and he has to do it to the absolute best of his ability. So the loyalty, I think, is, there's no doubt that he loves Frank. There's no doubt that he loves what he does for a living, but he's addicted to that job. He's addicted to being the best that he can be at all times. And again, that's another place where I just understand this guy. He does some bad things, but he's not a bad person. He's a good. I think he's a good person. He does some despicable things, but he's not all bad.
Do you think he's like naive at any level to what the greater good is? Like that he actually believes that Frank is a good president on some level?
Well, I do think he thinks that. I think that there's no doubt that he believes that that's the best person to be in office. He knows that Frank does some terrible things as well. But he knows that that's the person he would rather have in office than anyone else. And not just because he works for him. He believes in Frank.
And I think like it's almost like he's in love, and I'm not trying to draw any sort of like sexual or romantic links, but just in his devotion. And that like sort of he's clouded to other people in the political world. He just Frank's the one for him when it comes to politics.
Yeah. I don't even think there's a cloud there. I mean, I think that, whereas Dunbar would have been a very efficient person to run the country, and I'm sure he even believed that, but he knows that bad things have to happen in order to run the country the best it can be run. I think that he thinks, though, that Francis is the best person to run the country.
And what do you think about...
To answer your thing, I don't think that there's any naivete in there. I think it's just that's what he believed.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And do you think now, I guess because of this big decision Doug makes with the waiting list, the donor waiting list, we do see the guilt weigh on him for the rest of the season, and it leads to a interesting relationship with the widow of the man who passed away. How did you find about how that sort of storyline relationship progressed over the season?
My first thought on it was like, wow, that's just again really sick. Like he kills this man and then goes and starts a relationship with this woman. But the more we went into that and started to unravel it, it all makes sense, and it all again comes back to addiction. He goes on the website to make a donation because he does feel guilty. Just like he still carries Rachel with him. He feels guilty over that, I think. He loved her, for God's sake. I mean, it was that's just, but he had to do it in his mind. So I think with that, once you started to unravel it, once we went back and we're like, okay, so he commits this act to save the president. That's fine. That's great. He goes online. He feels a little guilty. He makes a contribution. And just like the alcohol or any other addiction for him, it does give him a sense of relief for a moment. And then when he looks at a picture, and then he sees this woman, he's like, huh. And then he looks at another picture, and then he looks at another picture, and then he looks at another picture. And then it starts to become an addiction. And he's like, maybe I do want to talk to her. Maybe I should talk to her. Not out of guilt at this point. I think it just became something that he's like, what is that? And then maybe it was that he just wanted to apologize in person, and then he did, and he met her, and he liked her, and things started to happen. And then does that become an addiction? I don't know where we're going to go with that storyline picking up, because we obviously leave off with it for at least Doug's part of that. It's where we leave off, and it'll be interesting. I'm very curious. I'm hopefully one of the writers from today. To get my first little nuggets of what's to come.
Yeah. Do we like you mentioned like how the guilt from Rachel sort of carries on with him. How this is a new thing where guilt like has sort of built. Like, do you reckon there'll become a point where the guilt builds so much for Doug, and maybe with other decisions he's going to be making in future seasons, where he reaches sort of a breaking point almost, and just like that guilt sort of could lead to a sort of break in his relationship with Frank, or not?
I wouldn't think so. I don't know. I honestly can't speak for the writers, and I don't know what they intend. And I never really, Bo was always like, if you have an idea or you have some thought of where we should go, or I'm always open, and I'm like, you guys are killing it. You're great writers, and I'm not. So I'll let you take me wherever you want to take me. I've enjoyed every single scene I get to do on that show. So yeah, I don't know where we'll go with that. It's hard to say.
Someone asked me to ask you, Michael, why Doug is such a weird man.
I don't think he's weird, man. He does some weird things, but I guess it just goes back to the bad for the greater good, the addiction issues. I mean, there's a lot of things that make the makeup of Doug Stamper, his willingness to just not emote and not, you don't know what he's carrying. I try to always, when I'm doing my work, no matter how simple the scene is or whatever, is to try and take all of the things that are happening in the world and bury it inside, and then let it come through maybe in the work. If it shows, it shows, but have all those thought things, his thought process going during all the, I'm having a hard time explaining it. But I think if you bury all the things inside and let it come out through the work in whatever way it comes out. So I think a lot of times he has so much going on inside that he just comes off as a little weird, you know, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain that, but.
Claiming that Doug was not weird is exactly what Jane Atkinson said you would say.
I love it. That's great.
She had to say that to you that she thinks he's weird anyway.
He does some weird things. I'll give Jane that. Yeah. She was so good this year.
Wasn't she?
I thought she just nailed it, man. I thought that, I mean, Jane Atkinson is an accomplished, phenomenal actor, and to get her for her to get to finally show on this show what she's truly capable of, you know, that's those scenes where she's going head to head with Frances, I thought were some of the more compelling scenes of the entire season.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the biggest scenes on one of the most talked about scenes maybe in House of Cards history was the Meacham threesome scene with Meacham, Frank, and Claire. And I hear on the set you had your own threesome scene at some point that didn't make the final cut. Is that true?
Are you talking about when I ran naked on this?
I wasn't thinking of that, but do tell us, Michael, what that story.
Well, I'm curious to hear your we call it the threesome. What you heard about what I had on set, but no, we were filming that stuff where I'm duct taping my arm up, crawling out of the bathtub. There was more stuff that didn't make it into the final cut of that, but basically for a few days I was just on set in my apartment there in a nude thong, just paint out the thong, you know, when I was supposed to be naked. And I was walking back from that set, and there was another unit doing a scene with Frances and what's his name, the Putin character. Oh gosh, Mickelson. Anyway, two of them were doing a scene, the Russian president and the president. And I said, what are they filming over there? And he was like, it's Frances and the Russian president. They're in the Oval Office. And I was like, cool. And I walked over there. I just had on a bathrobe at the time over my thong. I was going back to change into Sanford sweatpants or whatever for another scene. And I ran over, and I was in the 80s, like, all right, we're moving on. And I was like, do one more. Give me one more. And he's like, come on, man. He's like, I've got a long day. I was like, give me one more. So Frances is supposed to open the door and usher out the Russian president, and I came, I came running up in my just my thong on. I was like, "Hey man, have you seen my glasses? You see my glasses?" And Frances is there with the Russian president. It was made for pretty funny, and Frances or Kevin said some pretty funny things that I don't want to repeat for my own expense, but it was it was a good time.
Oh, that's good. That's a good story. The thing I think, I'm trying to remember what Jane told me, that there was a scene or a moment on the show. Yeah,
that's right. I forgot about that. Now I remember when you said Jane, because Jane was there with Claire and Nev's character. We were. I forget, Frances was doing a direct address. That's what it was. And in the background, like sort of back over there where those flowers are, was supposed to be me and Robin and Nev. And the director said, what did he say? Maybe he said something like, and the three of you will just stay back here. You'll just be playing around or fucking some sort of sexual innuendo, or it could have been interpreted both ways. And we're like, oh, all right. So Nev and Robin and I were talking, and what ended up happening was, as Kevin left the scene with Robin, Robin joined us over at the table, and we had worked it out where as Kevin comes and he gets closer and closer to the camera like this, in the soft in the background, those guys racked to us, and Robin was, what was it? Robin was laid out on a table like this. Nev was between her legs, and I was behind Nev. We were simulating a pretty great threesome back there. Kevin, as he's doing his direct address, you just hear crew members start laughing, and Kevin was just like, turn back. I knew it. I knew you guys were gonna do something. It was right in the middle of his take, and it's just an example a good example of how much fun we actually can and do have on that show, because we all come so ready to work that we can have a little time to play around. Thrilling for me though.
Last year,
Robin Wright and Nev Campbell and myself, even simulated, was a pretty incredible experience for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Last year, Michael, you got nominated for your first Emmy for House of Cards. That must be so exciting. Walk us through what it was like going to the Emmys as a nominee and that sort of first nominee experience.
I mean, it was so surreal, just going there. I had been before to the Emmys when the show was nominated, and it's just such a great time. I mean, you see all these people that you love, respect, admire, friends that you only see once a year at the Emmys or whatever, parties or the SAG Awards or whatever, was incredible by itself. But then to be nominated, I was like, I mean, first of all, I don't know if I told you how I found out when that happened that year, but we were on set. Robin was directing, Kevin and I were doing a scene, and they were like, okay, we're going to turn around. And so they were like, you guys can go back if you want. So Kevin's like, come on, they're about to announce. Let's go watch my trailer. And I was like, all right. And they were like, the show and Kevin and Robin, and we're like, yeah. And then they're like, all right, for everybody else, you can go online and get the results. And Kevin's like, come on, pull it up, guys. And they're looking for it online. I'm like, Kevin, I don't think it's gonna happen, dude. I said, come on. And he's like, I want to see it. So they're like, guys, we need you back on set. They don't have it. We go back to set, and Robin, we're right up to the moment of saying rolling. When Bo Willimon walks in, and he's done this every year that we've been nominated, Bo will come on the set and say, hang on, everybody, come around. I just want to congratulate the entire crew and say thank you. We were nominated for XYZ, and he said, so I just want to thank the crew. We were nominated, the show was nominated again. Kevin was nominated again. Robin was nominated again. And he turned to me and he was like, and you? And I was like, what? I was like, oh my God. I'll admit it, I totally cried. I was just like, and then I had to, I'm laughing so hard. I'm like crying. It was so emotional. And trying to, hide my tears and be cool and whatever. But it was so hard. I just was so thrilled. And Bo was like, yeah, you did it, man. I was like, oh my God. And then, there is a little celebration going on or whatever. And then they were like, okay, let's go. And I have to go back to being all tough guy Doug Stanford on the inside. I'm just like, oh my God, I got nominated for an Emmy. Oh my God. So to get to go like that, to talk to my wife and my manager and my agent and my mom and dad and everybody that I talked to that day, and then the millions of texts that you get, and just the emotional roller coaster that it is, and you carry that for the whole time until you go to the Emmys, when you're just like, oh my God, I am at the Emmys as a nominee. And it was just, I don't know how to explain it. It was, but I enjoyed every second of it. I tried to really I went with my wife, who was my best friend, and my other half, and we really just took it in, and we had the best damn weekend. It was so much fun.
Oh, well, I remember seeing you on the weekend, Michael, at the Governor's Ball. I'll check. Got some photos here. Here we go. Here we are at the
yes
Governor's Ball together. And you just lost, but you still seemed in good spirits.
I mean, come on. It's like, people that you get asked that question on the red carpet, do you think you can do it? Do you think you can pull off the win? I'm like, I won. I got nominated. I'm here at this party as a nominee, and I really feel like, you know, to get that nomination is a win, because quite honestly, at that point, you know, even to be in these discussions, it's incredible. And then at that point, it's apples and oranges. There's no, in my opinion, there's no best. There's no, you know, you're there. It was a thrill, man. It was a thrill.
Yeah. And you hadn't told me before how you found out about your nomination last year. But if memory serves, I think your mum found out about it at Gold Derby.
She did. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah. So that's
And
where
she-
hopefully. Yeah.
Man,
Sorry.
I think my mom, you know, I just told you, and I'm sure you can see it in my face, just what it meant, and how exciting it was for me. I think it actually meant more to my mom and dad, which again just makes me, you know, they've been so supportive of me my entire ever since I left college, you know, just and I don't mean financially. I didn't come from a lot of money at all, but the emotional support that I had from my folks and my brother and my sisters, my whole team, everybody's just been so, you know, I was so naive when I moved to New York. I was like, yeah, I got my degree. I'm going to be an actor. I just thought that's what you did, not realizing how hard it was, or not even caring for the 7 years before I made a living, hustling every single day. Like, I had the support of my parents saying that, yeah, you follow your dreams. This is what you're going to do. And obviously being, you know, set your goals, that my mom always said, and being nominated for an Emmy was certainly one of those goals that I had set for myself. So you know, my mom knew that. And so the pride that they had, it just makes you feel so good as a person, you know?
I remember you introduced me to her at the Everest premiere last year, I think, and yeah, it was nice to meet her. And I wouldn't be surprised if she watches this interview. So I don't know if you'll be in trouble for swearing earlier on.
I probably will. If we could beat that, it would be incredible. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I guess one question, like just to sort of wrap up the House of Cards season 4 discussion. Oh, firstly, if you got nominated for an Emmy again this year, what episode would you submit, or have you already submitted an episode through for their site over there?
I don't know. I let my team pick last year, and if that were the case, I'd let them do it again, because I don't pretend to know or remember what won. You know, I mean, I love all that stuff I got to do with Rob, and I love that scene with Seth. The problem with Doug is that I think that in picking like an episode or a scene that's the showiest or whatever, I don't, you know, there's not. It's hard, because just tracking that crazy dude's mind for a season is it's like, well, what crazy weird part do you pick? I don't know. I leave that to other people. I can't do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And last year had like the first episode was such a Doug central episode, sort of like a very obvious choice. Where this season you got the one with Seth, and then you got the one with the Surgeon General, and sort of like you know, it's like a bit more spread out, the performance this year. There isn't that obvious. Oh, there's that episode where Doug's in 60% of it. Like,
yeah, right. I mean, it's true. And is that I don't even know what they submitted last year. Was it the first one?
I think it was.
Because I remember them saying they were picking between 3 last year. I don't know. Like I said, that stuff's so overwhelming to me. I'm just like, just do it. Just do it for me.
Yeah. We've got also how do you feel about the end of season 4 of House of Cards with Frank? Is that the worst thing Frank has ever done? Started a war to win an election?
Probably, yeah. I would think so. I mean, we'll see where it goes, but I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And the two of them coming together like they did, and like you just said, it's like, wow, okay, we're in big trouble, and things are really going to go south for us. And they prove that once again they are willing to do literally anything to further their own good. And I was just like, oh God, and when she broke the fourth wall, I was like, oh, shit. What are we in for in season 5, right? I mean, I don't think we're going to see Claire direct addresses. Who knows, though? Like I said, I don't know anything about 5, but I know it'll be interesting because it was sort of seeing her break the fourth wall. You're like, oh, wow. She's like, I'm an equal. You know, it's us, not you. I thought it was just fascinating. And I was there for that scene. I was done for the day, but they had that scene to shoot, and I stayed, and it reminded me of the Fincher days when they just take after take after take after take after take, because it's a oneer, you know, the whole long, steady push in. And I couldn't leave. I stayed for every single take and was just riveted, trying alt line endings. And it was just, you know, you're watching some of the best actors, and to get to hang out on set and see that, you're like, I don't need to go home yet. I'll hang out.
There is something so exciting, like when I've gone seen shows on Broadway with great actors, or comedy stuff with some great actors. Like you going, oh, they're right in front of me performing. Like I'm witnessing this live. There's something really exciting about that.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, you just wrapped Taboo. Do you want to tell us a bit about that project?
Yeah, it's incredible. I got to work with another absolute one of my favorite actors, Tom Hardy, who I think is probably one of the best going right now, and one of the kindest, coolest dudes. But it's early 1800s when I think it's just after the War of 1812, East India Trade Company, the United States government, the British government, all pining for a piece of land that Tom's character has. And he comes home from Africa, and he's just, a wild man. And he comes back and just wreaks havoc on everything. I play an American spy, living in London at the time. It all takes place in London. And it's just, it's an incredible project. Stephen Knight, Tom and his father Chips created the project. It's theirs. And then Stephen Knight wrote it with them. And it's just, the writing is phenomenal. The look is incredible. Tom's performance is just regular Tom Hardy, just badass. It's great. I'm so thrilled for it. It's a BBC FX co-production. Oh,
nice. And when can we expect to see that?
I think probably early 2017 would be my guess. Okay. 8-part limited series.
Oh, nice. And to wrap up, Michael, now in House of Cards season 4, Frank got shot, but he did not die, which I guess that wasn't a huge surprise. I would have been pretty shocked if Frank had passed away 6 episodes into the season. But imagine Frank was dying. Imagine Frank did die, and Doug got to say some final words at Frank's deathbed. Frank decided to call in, bring in Doug Stamper. He'd have some nice things to say to me. What do you think Doug would say to Frank if he had those last words? What would the one thing he'd want Frank to know about him?
One thing you want him to know?
Yeah.
I mean, as my character saying something, I think that,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's my mom. So funny. How do I?
Oh, great. Feel free to answer if you need to, Mike.
I got it. Sorry, Mom. I'll call you back. Okay. I don't know. Those writers are geniuses. They would. It's so funny because I could think of a million things, and they'd be like, "Yeah, but what about?" And it would be 10 times better than any of the things that I thought of. But it's funny because the first thing that just popped into my head was what you said earlier, and not something I really thought about before. And I'm not saying this because you said it, but the first thing that popped into my head when you said that was, I love you. Like, I think that there is, and again, not to go to a sexual place, but there's no doubt he does, he loves that man. He knows, I think the two of them are the only two people that each other can trust 100%. I think that Frank knows he can trust me more than anyone. Obviously it was proven that more so than his own wife. And I think that's a two-way street there.
But you've only got one more strike Michael.
But if I said I love you, it would just be cheesy. If they wrote it, it would be great. I don't know. That's the way it is.
Yeah. It's like, it's probably what he would really want to say, but it's so hard to imagine him saying it as well.
But he probably would just say nothing. And that's sort of what I meant about burying things, right? Like, because Doug doesn't say a lot, that's probably what I would have in my inside. And I would go to the bedside and I would not say anything, but you would know that I said I love you in some sort of, you know what I mean? That sounds weird, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah,
no, I know what you mean. Michael, it's great talking about House of Cards. Great talking about the Emmys. All the best of luck again.
Thanks, man.
Excited for Taboo, and say hi to your mum for me.
Will do. Thanks. Great to see you, buddy. Take care.
Yeah, no worries.
Bye-bye.
Okay.